Hello, my name is Addison Adelberg, and my project is on the topic of Returning Soldiers, the essay by W.E.B. Dubois. For my project, I'm going to provide some pictures of certain events and people that have to do with this topic, with my voice talking over and kind of explaining what's going on in those pictures. So, before I begin, I want to give a brief history on W.E.B. Dubois. So he was born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. He grew up there and worked for a newspaper as a youth and did work like that. He entered Harvard in 1888 and went on to earn his PhD from there in 1895. He was one of the founders of the NAACP in 1910 and went on to become the editor of that paper and served as that from 1910 through 1934. In May of 1919, he had a piece published that was entitled Returning Soldiers. This was published in his highly successful newspaper known as The Crisis. Now, to provide some context to this piece, let's first look at some facts about Dubois prior to the war even starting. First, he had a massive call for African Americans to enlist in the army because he believed that military service would go a long way in helping them to eventually claim equal citizenship. Second, he was simply trying to change the perception of African Americans coming back so that they were able to live equal lives to their white counterparts. Okay, now that we have that, let's get back to the article. This article was published by Dubois with the intent of changing the narrative on black soldiers throughout the war. To provide some context, throughout the entirety of the war, 32 men were executed by military tribunals for either rape or murder. Of those 32 men, 28 of them were black soldiers. Dubois heard many of the rumors that others had heard about how American officials were pressuring French officials to not treat African American soldiers as equals to their white counterparts. One of the most chilling quotes came from Reverend Francis J. Grinke, who was a brother of NAACP board member and friend of Dubois' Archibald Grinke. Reverend Grinke said, "I know of nothing that sets forth this cursed American race prejudice in a more odious, execrable light than the treatment of our colored soldier in this great world struggle that has been going on by the government that ought to have shielded them from the brutes that were over them." Now that we've talked about that, it's time to dive into the essay to see what Dubois is really trying to say. Right from the first paragraph, the passion of Dubois' message burns deep through the mind of the reader. He rightfully paints the picture of how the African American soldiers, quote, fought gladly into the last drop of blood. The black soldiers of this war were just as helpful and capable as any white soldier was at that time, but it was very clear that being a black soldier came with a much larger set of obstacles than being a white one did. At the end of the day, Dubois simply wanted equality so that these problems would not have to be faced by the African American in any context, not only for the soldiers of that time. Throughout the article, Dubois hits on certain words to really let the audience know what he is feeling and to hammer home his point. He uses words such as lynches, disenfranchises, ignorance, steals, and insults to show the monstrosity of what is occurring in the country at this time. Not only that, but he is using these words in reference to America. It lynches, it disenfranchises, it steals. He is constantly using the word it to show that it is all of America. Everyone is included, even if they have not directly done anything. Simply being aware of what is happening and not trying to change something or make a difference is just as bad. And for the people who don't know, they need to be made aware of what is happening so that things can finally change. At the end of the essay, Dubois then shifts the focus to the word we. We return. We return from fighting. We return fighting. This shows the strong resilience and resolution that he is calling upon for his fellow African Americans. He wants change and is not being very shy about it. The article ends with the following line: "Make way for democracy. We saved it from France, and by the great Jehovah, we will save it in the United States of America, or know the reason why." This is the ultimatum that he gives the people. He is determined to change things and knows that nothing would happen over the course of one day. When he says, "or know the reason why," he is trying to say that if things don't change, they will know that is the way it's going to be, and other actions must be taken in the matter. The article was met with amazement and awe throughout the country at the time of its release. Of course, the super deep southern areas weren't very receptive to it, but to a lot of America, it was a very good wake-up call. African Americans who read the article were specifically touched, and it is considered to be one of the more important essays of the civil rights movement. African American Detroit lawyer Robert Barnes even wrote Dubois and said, "I do not know that I have ever read anything so clean-cut and convincing based upon first-hand evidence." This was perhaps one of Dubois' most famous pieces, and it has contributed to what is already a huge legacy of fighting for rights and equality of the African American.